Welcome back to Diary of an Introverted Author. My name is Bobby Lou, and I am the author of 3 published novels, Desperate Girls, Baby Pawn, and my newest release, For You I Would. All are available on Amazon.com. Again, welcome back. This is the second episode of Diary of an Introverted Author, and we're going to be starting a series called Page 1. If you listen to my previous podcast or my recent blogs, you know that I'm a new writer and that on the front end and throughout the process, I have made a series of mistakes. In creating the blog, it was initially to address the marketing issues that I was having because of me being introverted. I think marketing looks different for introverts, and I just had a hard time figuring that piece out. So I don't do it right now. I do intend on getting back in line with figuring out what works for me. I actually just recently booked a session with a coach that will help me with my marketing and social media goals. But in the meantime, my purpose for starting the podcast was about the marketing, but it was also once I, figured that I wanted to do that and find my tribe. I know I'm not the only introverted author. I know that, there are others out there that have figured out how to do marketing, and then some that are in the same position that I'm in. And I, again, wanted to find my tribe and wanted to have someone to walk this journey with. And when I started, I was thinking about the marketing, but also it came up because I've had mistakes with the writing process, with the editing, with publishing, with, from beginning to end. And I figured if I'm already in this position where I have to correct something or figure out how to do it where it works better for me, then why not do that with others that are on the same journey? So one of the biggest issues that I had was actually overcoming whatever it was that was preventing me from writing. So when I thought about page 1 as where we would start, it was because to be a writer, you have to get your story on paper. And for such a long time, I had a hard time doing that. I remember I want to say it was 5th grade, it might have been 6th grade, that I actually wrote my first poem. And I wrote poetry throughout my teen years and even into my 20s. And I want to say maybe a couple in my 30s as well. But when I was in high school, I wanted to be an author. And I remember specifically it was a short story we wrote about something Halloween related. And I just fell in love with that process of being creative and writing a story. And there was something about it that just resonated with me, and I really enjoyed it. And that was my goal, was to be a writer after I had completed that activity. And I got my grade back and I got the paper back, and I just kind of shoved it in my book and went on about my business. I did get a B on it as opposed to an A, and I don't know if that has something to do with it. I don't know, but I sat on that desire for a long period of time. I like to joke that if you take a scale from 0 to 100 and you turn it into age, I'm on the latter end of that scale. And when I think about it, I've missed a lot of opportunities because I sat on it for so long. In my late 20s, I actually started a book, and I would write and put it away for a period of time. I'd go back to it, I'd rewrite, I'd put it away, I'd go back to it, I'd rewrite, may get an extra chapter or 2 in there, but never making any real progress, just running in circles basically. Along the way, I'd start a new book and again, only get a couple of chapters in, then I'd start something else. And that was my pattern for a long time until I say last year, but it was actually 2022. I did NaNoWriMo. And then over the course of that next year, I had written multiple books and to completion. So when I a lot of times when I talk about it, I'll say with intention and to completion, because for me, those two things, it serves a purpose. I want to, when I write, I don't want, there's, journal writing, which is something I do sometimes as well, but that is simply for me, to get my feelings out, to work through something, to be grateful, to, there's purpose in it, but it's just for me. And with my writing, when I write books or manuscripts, that is because I want to move forward. I want the process of me writing to have a completion of publication so that I can share my writing. But I had sat on it for so long, and when I think about the reasons why, it's very common reasons. I think the main reason is self-doubt and fear. I think that holds a lot of people up. And for me, I'm one, again, if you've listened to some of the blogs, I am one where if I see an issue, I need to address it. I've not always been like that. Sometimes I used to think it's better just shove it under the rug and go about your business and everything will be fine. But now it's more along the lines of, well, figure out what the actual issue is so that you can deal with it, or that you can resolve to leave it alone and not move forward. Well, for me, leaving it alone and not moving forward, I pick and choose, depending on how important it is to me. But I figured out that because I'm on the latter end of that age thing, that spectrum, I want to accomplish certain things in my life. And I always knew that I had a couple of books in me. As it turns out, I have more than a couple of books in me. But I have resolved that I'm going to live, breathe, and love that which is in my heart. And writing is one of those things that's in my heart. I cringe when I see and hear people that want to write but can't, whether they don't seem to think they have the time, or because they're fearful, or because they don't really know what the block is. They just know that they have this desire that's not going anywhere because they can't go through the steps of getting something on paper. I cringe because I've been there before. So, when we look at fear and self-doubt, those are the two biggest things that prevent us from writing. And it could be fear of anything. It could be fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of the unknown, fear that, you're not good enough. It could be really anything. I really, when I talk about the paper I did in, one of the papers I did in high school, and how that made me feel like I wanted to go down that road of being an author, I'm really wondering if me getting a B as opposed to an A had anything to do with me sitting on it for so long, because I clearly love the process of getting that story on paper and turning it in. I was excited, and for whatever reason, I put it away and didn't look at it again. I don't remember what it was even about. I just remember the feeling that I had of writing it, that creative process of thinking of, what I'm going to write about and where I'm going to put the little twist in there, and just that finished product. So for me, I want to say that it was fear of not being good enough. And then later it became a fear of something else. I know when I first wrote the book that I completed, it wasn't I call it a book, but in all actuality, I don't know what it's called. I wrote the whole thing. It was I think it was a little bit over 50,000 words. It wasn't to completion because I was stuck in the muddy middle, and but I did finish the challenge, which is what my goal was to do. But it was not something that I could move easily into the editing process with. I did scrub it and get it to a place where it's workable. But I did that. I did that just last year. I did that in, I think it was February of last year. So now it's still in draft form, but it's in a much more workable form because I got it to completion and it actually makes some sort of sense. So when I go back to edit, it's a better process of editing because it's mostly the structure is already there. But when I wrote, when I in my late 20s, I would write and rewrite. When I did that, I thought the process, and it went, well, one, I didn't know what I was doing, but the process of going back to it over and over again, and writing and rewriting, and, never really getting any real movement. But I remember thinking, this is a huge task. How do you go from, 30, 40 pages? And at that time, I thought that was like ridiculously a lot. Like, I thought it was ridiculous. I thought I had written a book already. Meanwhile, it was just a couple of chapters. But how do you go from 30 or 40 pages to 200, 300, 400 pages? Like, I could not fathom that. So at that part, at that juncture, it was the task was too big for me. So that was my fear of not being able to complete it, because it was just too big a task. Obviously, like, I've moved past that now, but one of the things that I like to do is kind of break it down, like, to figure out, like, what is stopping me. This feeling of being an author, it had not gone away. Like, it was between high school and college, like, I didn't think about it. But then in my late 20s, from my late 20s all the way up until I actually was able to write a book with intention and completion, like, that was my thing. I knew I had a couple of books in me. So I would venture to say, if you're struggling with the writing piece, and even if you're struggling with writer's block, I think sometimes those two things are similar. But if you're struggling with that, kind of figure out, piece together, or deconstruct, work backwards, why you think you might be experiencing it. Like, is there a fear involved? Is it some doubt that you're experiencing? Is it imposter syndrome? I think that's something that's very real, and it's on the front end and it's on the back end. You have very successful best-selling authors that will talk about that feeling of imposter syndrome. So it's very real. But I think there's a workaround for a lot of those things that we experience on the front end when we have a hard time moving forward with our writing. And one of the things that I like to do is, once I figure out where it's coming from, like what the fear is, and break that down, then I look for avenues where I can, I don't want to say cheat, but I can get around my feelings. But one thing, when I hit it head on, is kind of reframing how I think about things. So instead of saying, I'm not good enough, or, I don't know how to do that, I'm not, as well versed with that, I change it to, I'm still learning, and that's okay. It's almost like the power of yet. I haven't mastered this yet, but I'm still moving forward. I haven't perfected this yet, but I will one day. And I hate that I just use that word perfect, because that's one of the things that has held me up for so long. I think, sometimes that's another thing that gets us. If we can't put it out and have it be perfect, then for me, I know it stops me dead in my tracks. But I have to, again, realize that I'm not going to be perfect, because I'm a human being. I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. What I can do is try to get what I have to a place where I've done the best I can do in that moment. And then I have to be okay enough to release it. And then, like what I'm doing right now, I know that I've made mistakes that I need to correct. Some are easy to correct, and then some I can't correct. I just have to do better the next time. But, it's not the end of the world. I would rather put something out that I find an error in than to not put anything out at all. Now, granted, if it's a big error, then I'm going to have some issues with that. However, I read best-selling books that have errors in them. So I want to put something out that has a mistake or an error in the process or the structure or something like that? Absolutely not. But I do realize that as a new author, I'm still learning, and it's going to take me a while to get to a place where and again, I'm not going to say perfect because I'll never be perfect, but a while for me to get to a place where I feel secure in what I put out. Um, but I'll get there. I think every book that I've written, my third book was probably by far the best book in terms of the writing piece. However, and the funny thing is, like, the first two books that I wrote, it's part of a series. There's a third book coming out soon, but I love that story. I always love my stories. But I guess that's what makes us writers and authors. We love the characters and we love the stories that we tell. But the third book is a totally different book. Some of the same characters, but totally different book. But I still feel as if that book is probably the best book. However, I found different errors in my writing with that book, which is really weird. But I think that's because that was a book I wrote in first person as opposed to the first two books I wrote in third person. But, there are workarounds. So reframing. And then also for me, building a support network. So I'm involved with a lot of groups, writing groups online. And what that does, there's a quote, I don't know who says it, but I know a teacher always, I've heard the teacher say it several times, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. There's something to be said about that, because what you surround yourself with, that is what the brain picks up on. And that's, then it tries to kind of look for other avenues that's of the same. So, surrounding yourself, building your network, does a couple of things. It puts you in that frame of mind where you're among others that are already doing it. So the brain is going to help you to get to the goal. You still have to do the work, but the brain helps you get to the goal because you're surrounding yourself with that. But then it also provides you with people that you can bounce ideas off of, and people that can kind of help you along the way if you need help. Or, you can find critique partners or whatever the case is. So building a support network is crucial. I know it's crucial for myself, but I think for anyone that wants to have a long-term career in writing or being an author, I think it's important. The other thing that's important for me is my writing routine. I like to write every day. The last month and a half or so, I have not done that. It's usually every couple of days I'll write, but I was heavily trying to edit. I was editing one of my books. So that's why I wasn't writing every day, but I feel best when I'm writing every day. The other thing is, and when I talk about routine, though, it's like not just that you're writing every day or every other day or whatever the case is, but when are you going to write? And then kind of factoring into this next one, which is setting achievable goals. If you say, okay, well, I work until 5:00, and I'm gonna go home, and as soon as I go home, I'm gonna write an hour. What's the likelihood that you're really going to write an hour? Like for me, I know when I get home, I need time to get myself together. I need time to relax and let go of the day, and kind of reframe. So, for me, saying I'm going to write when I get home, maybe a couple hours after I get home, maybe when I get ready to go to bed and everything is settled down and it's quiet. But I know for myself, I have to write in the morning. And then, if I write in the morning, it's a better chance that I will write in the afternoon. I like to dictate sometimes. So if I'm dictating in the morning, in the afternoon, I'm going through that to make sure that it captured what I wanted it to capture. And I want to be clear that I'm not editing my writing. I might, clean up, putting a period here and a comma there, but I'm not editing. I'm really trying to get the story on paper correctly. So just making sure that it's correct. But setting goals that you can attain, and then once you reach it, then you push it a little bit more. But those are some of the things that can help you if you're at a place where you want to write and you can't get anything down on paper, or even if you have writer's block, because some of these things would help in that regard as well. I've always been told, now I haven't had writer's block like I've heard others have it before. but I've always been told and have heard that it is helpful to switch up your routine when you have writer's block. Because, if you're doing the same thing every day, then you're going to get the same result. And if you've gotten to a place where you've got the block, then if you change up what you're doing, change the time that you're doing it, change the process in which you're doing it, that may jar your brain to start working again, getting those words on paper. So in terms of getting started writing, just write the book. Figure the pieces out. What's stopping you? How do you address the fear or the doubt or whatever it is that's stopping you? Putting those 3 things in place would be a huge help in moving forward. And again, those things are building a support network or finding a support network, setting achievable goals, and then having a solid writing routine. And then, one other piece that I didn't talk about is just celebrating the small wins. Because I think in the process of writing, especially when you're having a hard time getting started, recognizing when you're making progress is important. And I think that's helpful in continuing that momentum of making progress. So that is all that I have for today. If you're still with me, thank you so much for listening. My name is Bobby Lou, and this is Diary of an Introverted Author. I hope you join me again for the next episode.